Hi, I'm Kimberly Washburn, Curator of Education at the Florence County Museum. Welcome to February's Family Day at Home. This month we're talking all about texture, and this project is called Foil Repousse Hearts. I'm going to show you how to take a piece of metal sheeting and turn it into a beautifully textured work of art. So let's get started. You're going to need to gather a few things from your Family Day at Home kit. You're going to need your metal sheet. This is aluminum. It's a little bit thicker than your everyday aluminum foil. So you'll need that. You'll need your heart template. You'll need your small cup of paint, black. This is black tempera paint, black tempera paint with a little bit of dish soap in it. And I'll tell you why we use that dish soap in just a little while. You're going to need your small sponge, which you're using for multiple projects, so hang on to it when you're done, and your stylus stick. You also have 2 sheets of newsprint. You're going to need those. And you'll need to gather a few things from around the house. You're going to need a pair of scissors. A pencil might be useful. And you're also going to need a paper towel. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is prepare our foil. Now the foil that I'm showing you today has 2 different colored sides. It has a silver side and a copper side. The sheets that you have are actually going to be all silver. But this is going to help me show you whether we're working on the front or the back. So this is just for the demonstration purpose. All right, so go ahead and find the newsprint, the 2 sheets of newsprint that are in your kit. And you want to kind of open those up. And we're going to refold them so that we create a nice cushioned surface for our foil to sit on. And that's going to be important, and I'll show you why. So I'm actually going to fold this paper into thirds. So it was folded in half, but we're going to fold it into approximately thirds. So just fold about a third over, and then the other third over. And then we'll fold this in half. Now, if you had a stackable newspaper at home, you could also use something like that to create the cushioned surface for us to work on. And that should probably end up being about the same size as your foil sheet. Okay. So now we are going to begin adding texture. So let me show you what the idea is. The idea with foil repousse is that we are going to use a stylus stick to draw on top of the foil on this cushioned surface. When we do that, where we're drawing is going to leave an indentation. And we're actually going to start out by drawing on the back so that on the front, the lines that we make push out or toward the viewer. So we're going to turn our foil over upside down. For me, that's on my copper side. For you, it's not really going to matter whether or not you're working, which side you're working on, but you're going to need to remember whether you're working on the front or back. One other thing I forgot to mention that might be helpful is a piece of tape. It doesn't matter, this is masking tape, but you could use clear tape, any kind of tape that you have around. And the only reason we're going to use this is just to kind of hold everything in place. So you might want to tape your foil down to your stack of newsprint just to hold everything in place so it's not slipping and sliding around. Okay, so the next step, I'm going to take my heart template and place it right on top of my foil sheet. And I'm just going to trace over that with my stylus stick. Now I could tape this down to make sure it's not wiggling left and right, but that's not really necessary if you can hold it still. So that's really just up to you. So I'm going to take this and I am going to just press down. Now I'm not really making any marks, you can see, because my stylus is really just a pointed stick. It's not a pencil or a marker, so I'm not able to see any marks. But when I lift up my heart template, I'll be able to see that heart shape. So you should be able to see that now. And I'm going to just go over that a couple more times, trying to kind of smooth out my lines on this heart. Okay? So I'm just tracing over that same line I just made, smoothing things out. Now, I do want to mention that if the edges of the foil seem a little bit prickly to you, or they feel like they're kind of getting you a little bit, you can always put some tape over the edges of the foil to keep yourself from getting like a little paper cut with the foil. It just really depends on the foil that you're working with. So if it's bothering you, please go ahead and put a little bit of tape over that just to protect your hands. Okay, and I'm gonna keep going around and pressing that in and trying to smooth out that line, making it a little bit of a thicker line than I had before so that it really stands out. I want to be careful not to break through the foil. I don't want to tear the foil. So I'm just pressing lightly but firmly in order to make a really good indentation. And going slowly enough that I'm not making mistakes. All right, so I'm gonna peel this tape up and take a look at what I have on the front. So if I flip this over, you can see that these lines are now popping out. That's exactly what we want. Now I'm gonna flip this over again, and I'm gonna start adding some line designs to my foil repousse. You can do this in a very planned out way. You could divide your heart into smaller sections and fill each section with a line design. Or you could go about this more organically, where you just sort of freeform adding lines and shapes. And that's what I like to do. So I'm just gonna start by kind of making a zigzag line this way. And you can go over that once or twice. And I'm going to add, maybe in this section, some stripes. So just some vertical straight lines. This is a great opportunity to think about how different types of line patterns can create texture in your work. Because remember, we are thinking this month about texture. And even though we are making some physical texture, different line patterns can imply texture as well. So there I've created some straight lines. I could also come back in and make some of these lines sort of like a grid, or what we call cross-hatched lines. So in there. And let's see, I might want to make this section little spirals. And I'm just gonna fill up my entire heart with different kinds of line patterns. So each section of my heart is gonna have a different little line pattern in it. Okay. So now I might want some curvy lines. Like so. And maybe some dashed lines. So not straight, but just a dashed line in some area. Like that. And maybe I want crossing lines. These kind of look like little plus signs in my heart. So just fill your heart with lots of pattern. You can see all the line patterns in my drawing. Now remember, this is the back of our drawing, so when we turn this over, all the patterns we've pressed in are going to be popping out at us. So let's do that now. Let's take a look at it. If we turn it over, I'm going to pull this piece of tape off, and we can see all these patterns, and when we feel over them, we can feel how those are raised lines. Now, here comes the tricky and fun part. We're going to make these lines stand out even more by turning it onto the front side. So now I'm on the front, and in between my lines, I'm gonna press down. So in between my lines that are raised, I'm gonna press the negative space or the in-between space down to make those raised lines come out even more. In between my little kind of plaid cross-hatching lines, I'm just pressing it in with a dot because there's not a whole lot of space to press in with a line there. And that just adds to the texture a little bit. It gives more layers of texture. So, there we go. And in between here, I could trace along those lines, just pressing in where those press out to add some more layered texture. And my dashed lines, maybe I just put some straight lines in between them that press down. See? And maybe kind of the same thing, just some dashes in here. So now I have, if I press it, I know it's a little bit shiny and probably a little hard to see on the camera, but those swirls, I'm going to do the same thing. In those negative spaces, I'm going to press inward. This process gives us lots of layers of texture in our work. And it creates a really beautiful result. This could be a really fun Valentine gift for a friend or family member. Okay, now we've completed, and if I turn it back over on the back, I can see that I have some things pressing in and some things pressing out on both sides. Now, I want to show you how to add, how to bring the texture out a little bit so that it's something that you can see a little bit more clearly. And to do that, we are going to use a little bit of black tempera paint with a tiny bit of dish soap in it. Now, the reason that we've added a little dish soap to the black tempera paint is because it'll actually help it adhere to the foil surface. So if we just put tempera paint right on the foil surface, a lot of times it'll just bead up. It won't actually stick. And the soap actually changes the viscosity or sort of the liquid texture of the paint and will allow us to spread it a little more evenly. So I'm just going to very lightly dip my sponge into this black paint, just a tiny bit, and I'm just going to rub this over the top of the front of my work. I'm working on the front side. We don't need to put paint on the back. We're just going to put it on the front. And it only takes just a couple of dips. And I don't need to put any on the outside border. I'm just putting it on the inside because we're actually going to do something to that outside area to kind of make that come to life a little more. And I'm going to take just part of the paper towel that I have here. I put that tempera paint on and it's going to start to dry pretty quickly. But I'm going to take a paper towel and while it's still damp, just start kind of rubbing it away. And I'm not trying to rub down into those grooves. I'm just trying to rub the tempera paint off of the top. You can actually use newspaper to do this rubbing as well. And I'm not going to rub any more for right now. I'm going to just let that kind of settle. But you can see that it is starting. We've got some black paint down in the bottom edges and we've already pulled it off of the top. Now if you rub too much off, like down in here, I wish I had a little bit more paint still down in there. Then I can just come back in with my paint, dab some more back on, and this time when I rub it, I won't rub quite as hard in those areas. I'm gonna just try and leave a little bit more paint behind right there. I might wanna do that in several areas. Okay. And while this is drying, we're going to work on finishing up the shape of our heart. So you're going to want to make sure that you do the cutting part with the help of a grown-up. So please find a grown-up nearby to help you with this part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut out a little bit the heart shape, but I'm going to leave a little bit of the border. Now I'm going to cut some of these pieces off as I'm cutting because I don't want those little pieces to cut me. So I want to be careful as I'm cutting. I'm going nice and slow, trying to keep my hands out of the way. Remember, please, to work with a grown-up on this part, or at least a grown-up nearby that can keep an eye and make sure that you're working carefully to cut away this foil. So if you have some right here that's up against your hand, just cut that off so it's not up against your hand and could potentially cut you at all. All right, so what I didn't cut really carefully. I just kind of trimmed around the outside a little bit. And what I'm gonna do is create some little tabs that I'm gonna fold into the back to give it a nice finished heart shape edge. So let me get these pieces out of the way. So I'm gonna come around my heart shape and I'm gonna cut up to my outline of the heart, but I'm not gonna cut through it. I'm just cutting up to it. And I'm just cutting little tabs, just like that, all the way around, just little slices right into the middle, around the edge, up to the outline, but not over the top of it. And if your paint's still a little bit wet, then just let that dry a little more. And be careful not to stick your fingers in it. Okay. And right in the middle of the heart, I like to slice kind of right through the middle up to the point, just like a little vertical cut, just like that. And I'm gonna finish doing this all the way around. Quickly. Again, try not to cut through the outline, just cut up to it. And I'm holding this foil carefully so that I don't get any cuts. I don't stab myself with the foil. All right. Okay, and now I'm gonna turn it over so that I'm looking at the back. And I'm gonna take each one of these tabs and I'm gonna just fold them over on the back. Now you might ask yourself, why we cut all these tabs to fold it? Why didn't we just fold it over? The reason is because our heart is curved in shape, and it's very difficult to curve a nice smooth line or cut or fold a nice smooth line on a curve. It's much easier to fold these small little tabs that can overlap each other, and it'll give us a much nicer finish. So I'm just folding each of those over. Careful when you get into that corner because those edges are tricky. Again, this is very good to do with the help of a grown-up nearby. If you're doing this with smaller children, I would let them do the pressing in and then you, the adult, do this part. So let's flip it over and see what we have. Look at that. Our foil repousse heart is very close to being finished. Now my paint is still a little bit wet and I still have a little of my paper towel, but as our paint dries, we can go back in with a paper towel. I would let it sit for an hour or so to really get good and dry. Go back over it with your paper towel and kind of buff over those areas that are nice and shiny silver. Really shine it up nice to get a beautifully finished textured foil repousse heart. I hope that you're able to gift this to a loved one this Valentine's season, and that you enjoy creating textured work with foil.